Have you ever wondered what really happens on our motorways in the darkest hours of the night while most of us sleep? Secrets are being transported under the cloak of darkness. Secrets that, if revealed, would shake the foundations of public trust. I know this because I saw it, and I nearly paid with my life. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that, until March 2023, I was just another night shift security guard at a petrol station on the M1 near Leicester, a dull job, watching CCTV screens and doing occasional patrols during the long hours of the early morning. I never imagined that the night of 17 March would change everything. It was around 3:14 a.m. when I noticed something odd on the cameras. Traffic on the M1 at that hour was usually minimal. A few lorries, maybe the odd late-night traveller, but this was different. A convoy, precisely coordinated. 3 black vehicles in front, followed by a massive lorry with a sealed military-looking trailer and 2 more identical vehicles at the rear. There were no visible markings on the vehicles. No logos, no recognizable number plates. All had tinted windows and moved at a steady, controlled speed, like a meticulously rehearsed funeral procession. Curiosity got the better of me. I left the security monitor and walked to the back of the station, where a small rise offered a clear view of the motorway. The air was cold, damp, typical of an English March night. I remember hunching my shoulders against the mist that hung over the tarmac like a ghostly shroud. That's when I saw it. The lorry had pulled over onto the hard shoulder about half a kilometre ahead. The escort vehicles formed a protective perimeter, and men, I can't think of a better word, emerged wearing what I can only describe as full protective suits. They weren't police or firefighters. Those suits reminded me of the ones used in nuclear or chemical accidents. Something was wrong. I crept closer, shielded by the darkness and mist. That's when I noticed the liquid leaking from beneath. The lorry was a fluid that, even in the dim light, was visibly luminescent, a sickly green, pulsing, like something out of a cheap sci-fi film. Except this was real, and it was happening less than 500 meters from where I stood. The men moved with controlled urgency, communicating through gestures and radio devices. One of them carried what looked like a measuring device, pointing it at the liquid and then checking the reading. Even from a distance, I could sense his tense posture. I made the mistake of getting closer still. My foot slipped on loose stones, causing a small slide. It didn't seem loud to me, but in the stillness of the night, it was enough. One of the figures spun sharply in my direction and pointed. 2 others immediately started walking toward me, their movements deliberate, almost robotic in those strange suits. I didn't wait to find out what they wanted. I ran back to the station, my heart hammering against my ribs. I locked the door behind me, trying to steady my breathing as I watched the cameras. The men stopped at the edge of the property, spoke briefly, and returned to the convoy. Within 10 minutes, the leak seemed to have been contained, the strange liquid covered with some kind of foam, and the convoy moved on. I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a routine military transport, a vehicle with mechanical issues, nothing sinister. But the next morning, I woke with a splitting headache and nausea that doubled me over. My skin prickled as if thousands of invisible ants were crawling across. When I got to work the following night, I learned that 2 day shift workers had also fallen mysteriously. Both had been outside the station during that early morning, doing maintenance. I decided to contact the authorities. I called the local police, reporting the incident. Their response was polite disinterest, probably routine military exercises. I pressed them about the liquid, about the sick people. They said they'd log the report. I never heard. 3 days later, My phone rang. Private. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, almost bored. Mr. My surname. I understand your concern about the incident on the M1. I can assure you there's no cause for alarm. It was just a transport of standard industrial material. As for your illness and that of your colleagues, you might consider the possibility of food. The restaurant near the station has had several complaints. I froze. I'd never given my surname when reporting the incident. We strongly suggest you don't fuel unnecessary. It would be detrimental to your career, and possibly to your future health. The line went. The following week, I was sacked from the station for unexplained absences. Despite providing medical certificates for the days I was too ill to. Coincidence? Hardly. The most disturbing part came a month later. I ran into James, one of the other workers who'd fallen ill, at a local pub. His hair, once thick and dark, was falling out in clumps. He was gaunt, with deep circles under his eyes. He told me the other affected worker was in hospital with unexplained pneumonia. As we spoke in hushed tones in a corner of the pub, James confessed he'd tried seeking specialist medical help. The first doctor he saw was intrigued by his symptoms and suggested further tests. The next day, that doctor was replaced by another who quickly diagnosed stress and anxiety, prescribing antidepressants. They're everywhere, James whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. We can't trust anyone. A week after that meeting, James stopped answering my calls. His flat was empty when I went to check on him. The landlord told me he'd moved out suddenly, without notice, leaving nearly all his belongings behind. That's when I realized the gravity of what we'd witnessed. It wasn't just a random spill. It wasn't a simple military transport. The British government was moving something in the shadows, something dangerous enough to justify silencing ordinary witnesses. I decided to document everything I saw and send it to multiple sources. This account you're hearing now is one of those copies. If something happens to me, at least the truth will survive. Because there's something terribly wrong happening on our country's motorways, under the cover of darkness, and the question that haunts me every night as I try to sleep. Staring at the shadows on the ceiling. How many times has this happened before? How many innocent people have been exposed and silenced? And most importantly, what exactly is being transported in those lorries that the government so desperately denies exist? Allow me to introduce myself. I am, or rather was, an investigative journalist for a major British newspaper. After what I've uncovered, I prefer to remain anonymous. What I'm about to reveal could endanger not only my career, but my life. It all began in April 2023, when I received a cryptic email from an unknown source. The subject line was simply M1 17/03/23, and the body contained only a link to an obscure online forum where someone had posted an account of a strange incident involving a military lorry and a fluorescent leak. The account you just heard. First, I dismissed it as just another internet conspiracy theory, but something nagged at me. The precision of the details, the simplicity of the narrative, the absence of the sensationalist flourishes typical of fabricated stories. I decided to investigate, even if only to debunk it. I started by researching accident records on the M1 over the past 18 months. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. 17 accidents had occurred on specific stretches of the motorway, all between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., all resulting in temporary full closures. In each case, official reports cited spillage of non-hazardous industrial chemicals or standard safety procedures following a collision. The strangest part, there was no clear photographic evidence for any of these incidents. The traffic, cameras in those specific sections were conveniently under maintenance or experienced technical failures during the exact times of the accidents. Through contacts at the Department for Transport, I obtained the number of a former National Radioactive Highways employee who had abruptly resigned the previous year. After much persuasion and a promise of complete anonymity, he agreed to meet me at a train station in Birmingham. He was a middle-aged man, prematurely grey, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. His hands trembled as he clutched his coffee. "I shouldn't be talking to you," he muttered, barely moving his lips. "I signed so many NDAs, I basically sold my soul." He then told me about a special protocol implemented over the past 2 years. On certain nights, certain stretches of the M1 were given top priority code. Teams were instructed to redirect, cameras monitoring systems were temporarily disabled, and motorway patrols were diverted away from those areas. "We were never told why," he explained, "just that it was national security. But one night, I saw documents on my supervisor's desk, transport routes, precise coordinates, and a symbol I recognized immediately." He drew a symbol on a napkin. "The International Trefoil Warning for radiation. They're transporting radioactive material," he continued, "but not from known nuclear plants. From somewhere else to somewhere else. And it's not on any official record." 2 weeks after our conversation, I learned this man had died. "Sudden heart attack," the brief obituary stated. He was 47, with no history of heart problems, according to close friends. I dug deep through sources in the Ministry of Defense and contacts in the nuclear industry. I uncovered rumors about an unlisted facility, not a nuclear power plant, but something else, located on government land near Northampton. I spent weeks tracking down property records, archived environmental approvals, classified construction contracts, fragments of information that individually meant little, but together painted an alarming picture. The facility exists, and judging by the volume of equipment and materials transported there over the past 3 years, it was substantial. In June, I received a phone call. The voice was electronically distorted. "Tesco car park in Daventry, 11 p.m. Come alone. We'll know if you..." Against all journalistic good sense, I went. In the near-deserted car park, a car with tinted windows flashed its headlights twice. I got into the back seat. The driver remained silent. The passenger in the front turned pale. He wore a surgical mask and dark glasses, despite the "Have information about what you're investigating," he said quietly. "I work for a government agency I can't name. What's happening is bigger than you realize." According to this source, the British government had launched an experimental program involving modified radioactive isotopes. Not for weapons, he assured me, but for a new form of energy generation that would revolutionize the preliminary tests had revealed instability in the materials during transport. Occasional leaks occurred. They deemed it an acceptable risk given the technology's potential, he explained. Affected areas are quickly decontaminated. Public exposure is statistically insignificant according to their models. Demanded evidence. Without hesitation, he handed me a USB drive. "I'm risking everything," he said, "but the public deserves to know when they're being used as unwilling test subjects." The USB contained internal documents, risk assessments, and something even more disturbing, a list of exposure incidents, with dates, precise coordinates, and estimated numbers of civilians exposed. The list included the 17 March incident near Leicester. I didn't rely solely on the documents. I revisited several listed locations and, using radiation detection equipment rented under the pretext of a property inspection, confirmed Residual levels above normal at every site. Not alarming, but definitely abnormal. In July, I noticed a black car parked regularly near my flat. My phone started behaving strangely. Emails vanished from my inbox. Colleagues began avoiding me after conversations about my mental health that never took place. I arranged another meeting with my government source for August. He never showed up. 3 days later, I read about a tragic car accident involving an unidentified government employee. No photos, no details. The next morning, I found my flat ransacked. My laptop, backups, all physical notes, gone. The message was clear, but they made a mistake. They didn't find the original USB drive, which I'd hidden inside a disused light switch in my kitchen wall. I contacted international journalist colleagues, trying to ensure the story would break. Every single one, without exception, declined after consulting their legal departments. Too sensitive, insufficient evidence, national security consideration, the same excuses repeated. That's when I decided to take a different approach. Instead of pursuing major media, I sought out alternative platforms, people who weren't afraid of the consequences, because they'd already experienced enough to know silence was more dangerous than exposure. Like the man whose account you heard earlier, and like the person you'll hear from next, we're connected by a truth the British government is desperate to conceal. They're using our motorways to transport dangerous experimental radioactive materials, exposing innocent citizens in the process. As I record this, I feel my time running out. I've changed residences 4 times in the past 2 months. I use only prepaid phones, swapped weekly. My former colleagues no longer take my calls, but the truth must prevail. If something happens to me, know that copies of these documents are in safe hands, set to be released automatically. And if you're driving on the M1 late at night and see strange lights, unmarked military vehicles or personnel in protective suits, don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't breathe the air if you can help it. And definitely don't tell anyone what you saw unless you're prepared for the consequences. Because I now know there are secrets the British government will protect at any cost, even if that cost is the health and lives of its own citizens. I never expected to be recording this testimony. 6 months ago, I was just Emma Cartwright, a 34-year-old nurse at Northampton General Hospital. An ordinary, routine life, grueling shifts, the occasional weekend with friends, Netflix binges, normalcy. How distant that feels now. The night of 17 to 18 March 2023 changed everything. I was driving home after a 12-hour shift, exhausted but relieved at the prospect of 2 days off. It was around 3:40 a.m. when I joined the M1 towards Milton Keynes, where I lived, or used to live. Traffic was almost non-existent, as you'd expect at that hour. I remember fiddling with the radio, searching for something to keep me alert. That's when I saw the lights ahead. Not ordinary vehicle lights, but a strange, intermittent pattern. I slowed down instinctively. As I got closer, the scene became clearer. A convoy of vehicles was pulled over on the hard shoulder. At the center was a large lorry, flanked by black cars. People were moving around it, wearing what looked like full protective suits. My first thought was a chemical accident. As a nurse, my instinct was to stop and offer help. How naive I was. I'd barely pulled over when one of the vehicles broke away and sped towards me. 2 men emerged. They wore no recognizable official uniforms, not police, paramedics, or firefighters. "Madam, you need to turn around immediately," one of them ordered. This area is temporarily closed. I explained I was a healthcare professional offering assistance. His response was icy. We appreciate your concern, but the situation is under control. Please return to your vehicle and leave. It's for your own safety. While we spoke, I noticed a greenish glow emanating from beneath the lorry. It seemed almost pulsating. The man saw my glance and shifted to block my view. "What is that?" I asked. It's just automotive coolant, madam. Nothing to worry about. Now, we really need you to leave." His hand moved, subtly to a bulge under his jacket. It wasn't an explicit threat, but the message was clear. I got back in my car and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as they kept their eyes fixed on me. I should have gone straight home, but the nurse in me, the person trained to act when something's wrong, made me pull into a lay-by a few kilometers away. From there, using the maximum zoom on my phone's camera, I snapped photos of the distant scene. The images were grainy, but captured the essentials: the lorry, the men in protective suits, and that eerie luminescence. 20 minutes later, sirens announced the arrival of official vehicles, ambulances, police, fire service. A coordinated response, but strangely delayed, as if they'd waited for something to be contained before legitimate authorities arrived. The motorway was officially closed in both directions. Later announcements would cite an accident involving an industrial transport vehicle and the need for standard decontamination procedures. The road remained closed for 8 hours. The next morning, I woke with an odd sensation in my skin, a persistent tingling like tiny needles. My throat was dry, scratchy. I chalked it up to an oncoming cold, perhaps worsened by exhaustion. 3 days later, I noticed small red patches on my arms and neck, exactly the areas exposed while driving with my window partially open that night. By day 5, I started losing hair, not just a few strands, but clumps. By day 7, the nausea was unbearable. As a medical professional, I recognized the symptoms: radiation exposure. Not severe enough to be immediately fatal, but definitely not automotive coolant. I sought medical attention. The doctor who first examined me was genuinely alarmed by my symptoms. He ordered a battery of tests. I mentioned the M1 incident, its possible connection to my condition. He took detailed notes promising to investigate. At my follow-up, I was seen by a different doctor. Older, with an impassive expression, he reviewed my tests with studied disinterest. "Ms. Cartwright, your symptoms are consistent with extreme stress and a possible allergic reaction, likely to new hospital cleaning products. Nothing to worry about." I challenged him on the specific tests for radiation exposure. His response was immediate. "We didn't conduct such tests. They'd be unnecessary given your symptoms." I insisted I'd specifically requested those tests, that the previous doctor had agreed. For the first time, he looked me in the eye. "Ms. Cartwright, as a healthcare professional, you understand the dangers of self-diagnosis and clinical anxiety. I recommend rest and perhaps psychological support." I left the surgery with a prescription for anti-anxiety meds and antihistamines, and a growing certainty that something was deeply wrong. In the weeks that followed, I obsessively researched similar cases. I created anonymous online profiles, joined local forums, Eventually, I found 2 others reporting identical symptoms after passing through the same stretch of the M1 that night. A lorry driver, a university student returning from a party. We formed a discreet group. We compared notes, symptoms, medical experiences. All of us had received vague diagnoses. All of us felt watched, systematically discredited. One of us, the lorry driver, had a cousin who worked for the Environment Agency. At a family gathering after a few drinks, the cousin revealed that monitoring teams had been secretly sent to that stretch of the M1 in the days following the accident. Results classified. Teams reassigned to different projects immediately after. By June, our little group had grown to 7 people, all with the same progressive symptoms, all discredited by different doctors. We decided to act collectively, contacting investigative journalists, MPs, environmental organizations. Doors closed one after another, unanswered emails, calls not returned, meetings cancelled at the last minute. Then came the approach. A man confronted me in the hospital car park after my shift. Impeccable suit, no visible identification. "Ms. Cartwright, can we have a brief word?" Without waiting for a response, he continued, "I'm authorized to inform you that your case is being monitored and to offer a resolution." He explained I'd been inadvertently exposed to sensitive materials during a government transport, that my symptoms were temporary and non-fatal, that the government acknowledged its limited liability in the matter. They offered a substantial sum as confidential compensation. The catch? An extensive non-disclosure agreement, and the immediate dissolution of our unauthorized support group. "And if I refuse?" I asked. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Cartwright, as a dedicated nurse, you surely understand the importance of public safety. Unnecessary panic over experimental nuclear materials could cause incalculable harm." He paused deliberately. "Besides, your professional license is currently under review. It would be unfortunate if irregularities were found." The threat was crystal clear. Of our group of 7, 5 accepted the deal. The lorry driver vanished entirely. Phone disconnected, online profiles deleted. I was the only one left, still refusing to be silenced. 3 days after rejecting the offer, I was sacked from the hospital. Departmental restructuring. My flat was broken into twice. Opportunistic crimes. My medical records were mysteriously altered, now including a history of minor psychotic episodes that never happened. The message was clear. I'd be systematically discredited until I gave in or gave up. That's when I found the accounts you heard earlier. The security guard, the journalist. I realized we were pieces of the same dark puzzle. A pattern of transporting experimental radioactive materials on British motorways. Occasional leaks treated as acceptable collateral damage. An elaborate system to silence witnesses and victims. Today, as I record this testimony, my hair has finally started growing back. The skin patches are slowly fading, but the internal damage remains. Consultations with doctors outside the UK confirmed significant radiation exposure. Prognosis uncertain. Last week I received an anonymous letter. Inside, just a USB drive and a note. "The truth deserves to be known. Use it wisely." The contents were staggering. Internal documents detailing Project Prometheus, a classified program for developing new nuclear propulsion technology. Technical specifications for modified transport containers. And most disturbing, a list of non-reportable exposure incidents with dates, locations, and estimated civilian impact. The M1 leak on 17 March was there, classified as Level 2 exposure, partial containment achieved, limited population impact, limited. As if human lives were mere statistics, this recording, along with copies of the documents, is being distributed simultaneously to multiple sources. I know there will be consequences. I've accepted that. But you, listening to this, need to know. These transports are still happening, regularly, on motorways across the UK, usually between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. If you see strange lights, unmarked vehicles, or people in protective suits, don't stop. Don't question. Keep your windows closed. Drive away as fast as you can, because the British government has decided that technological progress is worth more than our safety. And anyone who questions that decision becomes an immediate problem to be dealt with, as I have. If this recording reaches you, it's because I'm still free to share it. If you never hear from me again after this, you'll know why. The truth is out there, literally passing through our motorways while we sleep. The question is, how much are we willing to sacrifice to expose it? The choice now is yours. Leave your like and be careful.